She sat silent in class, her sketch buried under worksheets, until the professor laughed and called it nonsense. Hours later, that same sketch went viral after MIT called it uncrackable genius. Now the school claims they discovered her, but what they did next almost erased her future forever. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Lockridge High School was the kind of place that liked its students loud, polished, and photogenic. Those who smiled often, raised their hands quickly, and spoke with confidence, even if they had nothing of substance to say, rose fast in the social and academic hierarchy. Silence, on the other hand, was read as weakness. It was not understood as observation or introspection. It was simply disobedience in disguise. And so Aaliyah Wren, black, bookish, and soft-spoken, was invisible. She didn't blend in. Not really. Her dark skin and thick braids stood out in the mostly white honors classes she somehow ended up in, despite the counselor's yearly suggestions to transfer into less stressful tracks. But what made her truly unnoticeable was her refusal to perform. She didn't participate in class theatrics, didn't raise her hand unless asked, didn't push back when her peers dismissed her ideas with polite indifference. She just sat still, pencil tapping softly, eyes distant. And for this, most of her teachers assumed she didn't care. "You need to speak up more," they'd write on her progress reports. "She struggles to articulate her thoughts," read another. "Seems disinterested." But inside her notebooks lined with worn paper and frayed edges, Aaliyah was sketching more than just solutions. She was building patterns, not equations from the textbook, but ones she was discovering on her own. She didn't know what to call them. They didn't have neat labels like parabola or binomial. They were sequences, lattices, recursive maps folding into each other like origami with numbers, shapes that made more sense to her than the words of any teacher. Her favorite place to think wasn't a desk or a quiet library. It was the back corner of the third-floor stairwell, under a flickering exit sign. There, with a 50-cent pen and whatever paper she could find, she could listen to the hum of the building and fall into the rhythm of her own mind. That's where the napkin sketch began. It had started during lunch, after Dr. Everett Lang, the school's prized math department head, presented a problem on the board that he claimed no one here could solve. His smile was smug as he leaned back, watching a room full of white honors students flail proudly through partial answers. Aaliyah didn't raise her hand. She simply watched, then left the room without saying a word. In the stairwell, she pulled a napkin from her lunch bag, flattened it on the concrete, and began drawing. She didn't just solve the problem. She mapped it, flipped it, and reimagined it into something else, something she didn't have the words for yet. When she finally folded the napkin in half and slid it into her binder, her heart felt steady in her chest. She didn't expect anyone to care, but it felt good to know the truth of what she'd seen, and what she could do. That weekend, Lockridge held its annual Advanced Math Invitational, a school tradition that showcased student-led problem-solving. Every student in AP Calculus was required to submit one original thought piece for exhibition. Most turned in recycled homework or group projects with polished graphs and long-winded explanations. Aaliyah turned in her napkin. No one saw her slip it under the submission pile. On Monday morning, the math hallway was decorated with laminated entries. Posters filled with equations printed in bold fonts, titles like The Efficiency of the Golden Ratio in Architecture, and Binary Encoding with Real-Life Applications. They were impressive, but they were also safe. Aaliyah walked past her own submission spot and saw nothing. Then she entered room 3B, Dr. Lang's classroom, and stopped cold. There on the center desk, surrounded by chuckling students, was her napkin. Unfolded, smudged, and pinned under a stapler like a failed exhibit. Dr. Lang held it up for the class, eyebrows arched in mock seriousness. "I believe this was submitted anonymously," he said, the corners of his mouth twitching. "Let's all take a moment to appreciate this contribution." Laughter erupted. One student coughed. "Did a toddler do that?" Another muttered, "Looks like someone's grocery list." Aaliyah said nothing. She sat down in the back row, her face expressionless, while her mind screamed. Dr. Lang squinted at the sketch. "It's imaginative, though perhaps not mathematically literate." He chuckled and tossed the napkin into the trash can behind his desk. "Still, good to see some of you thinking outside the box." Her body didn't move, but her heart had slipped into a sinkhole. Not because they laughed. She'd been laughed at before. For her hair, for her name, For being the only black girl in advanced classes who didn't try to sound like them. No, what stung was that no one even asked whose it was. They just assumed it was garbage. Assumed it couldn't mean anything. Assumed she had nothing worth seeing. Dr. Lang didn't ask. He didn't care. And still, Aaliyah said nothing. Later, as the class filed out, the napkin still sat crumpled in the bin. Most students didn't notice. One or two glanced toward it and smirked. The janitor, an older woman with tired eyes and headphones plugged into one ear, swept around the baseboards, humming. Her name was Miss Grace Halton. She rarely spoke to anyone except to say, "Excuse me," when her mop passed by. But today, something caught her eye. She reached into the trash can and pulled out the napkin. She didn't laugh. Instead, she squinted, turned it sideways, looked again. There was something oddly familiar in the lines. Something that stirred a memory she hadn't felt in years, since her own college days, before she left her graduate program under circumstances she never talked about. She folded the napkin gently, slipped it into her pocket, and kept cleaning. Aaliyah never knew. That night, Miss Halton sat in her one-bedroom apartment, the napkin under a lamp. She opened an old file on her computer. Something from her time in the math department at Carnegie Mellon. The symbols weren't exact matches, but they weren't random either. There was a coherence, a structural layering that mimicked recursive algorithms used in quantum topology. That kind of thinking didn't show up in high school. She scanned the napkin. Then she opened her email. To Dr. S. Nishida. Subject: pattern identification. Message:
Hey Sam.
Sorry to reach out of the blue. Weird question. Can you take a quick look at this sketch? Found it in a student trash bin. Can't stop thinking about it. Tell me I'm not crazy. Great. She attached the scan, hit send, poured herself a cup of tea, and waited. 10 minutes later her inbox pinged, then pinged again. Then her phone rang. And just like that, a napkin in a trash can became a spark, a signal, a trigger. Across the country, in a sterile office at MIT, Dr. Sam Nishida stared at the scan. He called his assistant. Get me, whoever drew this. The assistant paused. It's not signed. No name. Dr. Nishida's voice was sharp. Then find the school. Start there. We need to talk to this kid. Back in Lockridge, Aaliyah sat in her room, headphones on, sketching again. She didn't know her life was about to change. She didn't know someone had seen her. She didn't know her silence had finally spoken loud enough for the world to hear. Dr. Lang tossed it in the trash, but someone else saw it before it hit the bin. Miss Grace Halton had learned a long time ago that people rarely noticed the help. She swept floors, emptied bins, and wiped down lockers like she didn't have a past. As though the mind that once studied fractal symmetry at Carnegie Mellon had somehow dulled with age and bleach. But Grace's memory was sharper than ever. Sharper, in fact, than most of the teachers in the building. She noticed what they missed, and what she saw on that napkin sketch wasn't random scribbles. It was structure, raw, unfiltered brilliance. That night, after she emailed the image to Dr. Sam Nishida, a former research partner turned theoretical mathematics professor at MIT, Grace waited exactly 11 minutes before her phone buzzed. Is this a joke? Sam asked the moment she answered. No, she said quietly, sitting cross-legged on the couch in her modest apartment. Pulled it out of the trash at work. High school kid. There was a pause on the other end. This isn't undergraduate level thinking, he muttered. This is bordering on pre-quantum coding logic. Who submitted this? Grace exhaled. No name on it. Kid probably didn't even know what she'd done. I think so. Quiet girl. Black. Doesn't say much. Keeps to herself. Sam grunted. Send me everything you can. Handwriting samples. Any other sketches? I need to know what else is in that brain. Grace frowned. I don't have anything else. Just this napkin. You've got to find her, Grace. Working on it. Sam ended the call with a click, but Grace sat there long after the screen went dark, her hands tracing the edges of the paper again. She hadn't felt this stir of possibility in years. Not since her own career had been suffocated by the same biases now looming over this anonymous girl. Meanwhile, at Lockridge High, Aaliyah Wren moved through her Tuesday like a ghost with a heartbeat. Her binder was missing the napkin, and though she knew where it had gone, she pretended she didn't. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd made the sketch for herself, not for their approval. Still, it hurt. Not just the laughter in Lang's class, but the weight of being constantly underestimated. She'd heard the whispers since freshman year. She's probably just here on a diversity quota. Smart for a black girl. Surprised she's even in AP. Even when they didn't say it aloud. She heard it in how they looked at her work, suspiciously, as if waiting to spot the flaw. At lunch, Aaliyah sat under the same stairwell where the sketch was born, this time empty-handed. No napkin, no equations, just the dull ache of retreat. She didn't know that at that exact moment, an image of her napkin had just landed in the inbox of the chair of mathematics at MIT, flagged with the subject line, "Urgent, unmade genius." Dr. Keisha Lamont, the youngest black woman ever to head a STEM department at the institution, blinked as she read the subject line. She clicked. The napkin image appeared on her screen, creased and imperfect, but brimming with layered recursive geometry. She stared at it for a long time, her eyes narrowing. She forwarded it to her senior analytics team, with one line: "Find this student, immediately." The napkin started bouncing around MIT like a rogue signal. Nobody knew who had created it, but every expert who saw it agreed. This was not something a regular high school student should be able to produce. By the end of the day, Grace's inbox was flooded with requests for more information. She responded cautiously, offering only that she believed the student was a girl from Lockridge High. "No confirmation yet," she wrote. "And I don't want to spook her." Back in Lockridge, no one had yet connected Aaliyah to the napkin. In fact, Dr. Lang was still joking about it. During a department meeting that afternoon, he'd recounted the story again. "She actually submitted it," he said, chuckling. "On a napkin. Can you believe that? I mean, we should be grading that kind of creativity. Maybe give her an A for effort." The others laughed with him. Only one teacher, Ms. Clara Jensen from the English department, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She didn't say anything. But later that evening, she'd pass by Aaliyah sitting alone in the library, her head down over a half-finished graph. "Hey," she said softly, pausing. "I thought your napkin sketch was beautiful." Aaliyah looked up, startled. "You saw it?" "I did. And I'm sorry for how it was handled." Aaliyah swallowed, her voice low. "It was just something I was working on. I didn't mean for it to be funny." "It wasn't," Clara said. Then, without waiting for permission, she sat beside her. "Sometimes when people don't understand something, they laugh. Doesn't mean it's not brilliant." Aaliyah said nothing, but the edge in her eyes softened. Unbeknownst to either of them, Clara would later be one of the few staff members to come forward publicly when the full story of Aaliyah's genius and the racism that tried to bury it was eventually exposed. That night, Miss Grace Halton stood outside the main office after hours. The hallways were dark, quiet. She opened the locked cabinet with the maintenance key, pulled out a file labeled Student Progress, and began quietly flipping through it. She stopped at the W's, found Aaliyah Wren. Her grades were solid, B's and A's. But the teacher comments made her heart sink. "Shows limited initiative. Quiet to the point of passivity. Not sure she's ready for complex abstract material." Grace closed the file slowly, teeth clenched. She photocopied one page. Back home, she added it to the napkin scan and sent both to Dr. Nishida, then CC'd Dr. Keisha Lamont. Attached note: found her name. Aaliyah Wren. 11th grade. Lockridge High. This is bigger than we thought. The next day, MIT's outreach director called Lockridge's front office, requesting a meeting with Aaliyah Wren regarding a potential early recruitment opportunity. The secretary blinked, confused. "I think you've got the wrong student," she said. "We have a few seniors applying to MIT, but Aaliyah isn't one of them." "Is she in your advanced math program?" the director asked. There was a pause. "Technically, yes. She's in AP Calculus." "Good. Please schedule a time for her to speak with our team." The call was transferred to Dr. Lang. His reaction was immediate and defensive. "MIT?" he repeated. "That must be a mix-up. Aaliyah's a sweet girl, but not exactly Tier 1 material. Our valedictorian, Chad Morrison, is already applying." When the outreach director pressed again, Lang deflected. "I'm not sure she'd be prepared for a conversation at that level. Maybe give us some time to evaluate." The call ended, but Lang didn't relax. Instead, he walked back to his classroom, stared at the empty trash can where the napkin had once been, and frowned. Then he made a call of his own. "Principal Marston," he said, "we may have a situation." By Thursday, the school had launched a discreet internal review of how Aaliyah's sketch ended up in MIT's hands. Emails were quietly sent. Surveillance footage was checked. Grace noticed the increased tension and stayed quiet. But she wasn't done. At home, she crafted a carefully worded email. To Media Relations at MIT. Subject: Misattribution Risk. Message: the school may attempt to claim the napkin sketch was created by someone else. Please be careful. The girl's name is Aaliyah Wren. She deserves the chance you're about to give her. GH. By Friday morning, a sealed envelope arrived at MIT's Office of Admissions. Inside, a printed photo of Aaliyah sitting alone in the hallway. Notebook open, sketching. No name. No note. Just one line on the back. She's the one. An email with the subject urgent, unnamed genius, lands in a high-level MIT professor's inbox. Lockridge High prided itself on producing leaders. That was the word stamped across its mission statement, printed on banners in the gym, recited by guidance counselors and echoed in morning announcements. But at Lockridge, leadership had a narrow definition: confidence that took up space, voices that filled a room, usually white voices. In AP classrooms, the loudest boys often got the most praise. They raised their hands before the question finished, interrupted teachers mid-sentence, dominated group projects with half-formed theories delivered at full volume, and the teachers, most of whom had never questioned their own expectations, nodded approvingly. Great initiative, Kyle. Strong confidence, Dylan. Chad's got the makings of a real engineer. It didn't matter that Chad routinely borrowed answers from group chats, or that Dylan couldn't explain half the formulas he scribbled on the board. What mattered was that they sounded smart, that they moved through the world with the entitlement of being heard. Aaliyah Wren moved differently. She wrote her answers down quietly, solved problems in 2 steps that took others 10, asked herself better questions than the textbook offered. But no one called it leadership. They called it luck, or worse, assumed it came from somewhere outside her. She must have gotten help on this. Did she copy this from somewhere? Let's make sure she really understands it. Every compliment came with suspicion. Every achievement, an asterisk. Even her report cards were riddled with coded language. Teachers wrote that she was quiet to a fault, hesitant to participate, and lacking academic confidence, never considering that maybe she just didn't trust them. When she scored high on tests, they said it was surprising. When she scored average, they said it was expected. She lived in the dead zone of assumption, too smart to ignore, too black to fully believe in. Aaliyah's mother, Jolene, had grown up hearing those same coded phrases. She'd watched teachers in her own youth underestimate her, until it was too late to prove them wrong. So when she read Aaliyah's midterm reviews, she clenched her jaw and stared at the ceiling instead of flipping tables. I'll talk to them, Jolene said. No, Aaliyah replied quietly. They'll just say you're being loud.
That was the trap.
Speak up, and you're combative. Stay silent, and you're invisible. Aaliyah chose invisibility. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Even the structure of the school system worked against her. Advanced placement? She had to fight to get into it. Gifted testing? Never offered. College prep resources? Reserved for the high performers, usually the students whose parents donated to the booster club, or had names that sounded like they belonged on a country club sign-in sheet. It wasn't that Aaliyah was behind. It was that the system was never designed to recognize the kind of mind she had. Standardized tests asked linear questions. Aaliyah's thinking was dimensional, layered, fluid. She saw equations as shapes, numbers as relationships. But there were no bubbles to fill for that kind of vision. She scored in the 91st percentile, remarkable for any student. But at Lockridge, it wasn't enough to place her in the spotlight. Not when Kyle scored 92nd and got a whole announcement over the intercom. So she stayed in the shadows, until the napkin sketch, until a crumpled piece of paper, born out of instinct, thrown in a trash can, began ricocheting through one of the world's most elite institutions. And now MIT wanted to meet the student behind it. That request arrived in the form of an email addressed to Lockridge's principal and copied to the school's math department. The tone was formal, respectful, but unmistakably urgent. We are interested in speaking directly with the student responsible for the mathematical sketch forwarded to our faculty. This request is time-sensitive and academically significant. Principal Marston read it twice before forwarding it to Dr. Lang with a curt message. Who submitted this? Find out. Dr. Lang frowned. He remembered the napkin, remembered the class laughter, the mockery, the moment he'd tossed it aside like a joke. and now MIT was calling it academically significant. He pulled up the surveillance footage from that week's math fair submission Dropbox. He slowed the footage, frame by frame. There, just barely in the corner of the camera's wide lens, he saw a small hand slide a folded napkin under a pile of glossy poster boards. The camera wasn't clear enough to show the student's face, but the sleeve was distinctive. Denim jacket, rolled sleeves. 3 pins on the left arm. He scanned his class rosters. Then he checked his yearbook photos. Found her. Aaliyah Wren. He leaned back in his chair, a storm of thoughts brewing. No. No way. It had to be a fluke. A mistake. Maybe she copied it. Maybe she found it online. MIT wouldn't seriously believe. He picked up the phone, called the front office. Please don't contact her yet, he said. I need to verify something first. But someone already had. While Dr. Lang delayed, MIT's outreach coordinator, unable to wait any longer, emailed the front desk again, CCing Dr. Keisha Lamont directly. I'm following up again on our request to speak with the student who submitted the sketch. If you're unable to identify the student, we will pursue alternate contact methods. That email was accidentally forwarded to the entire math department. Panic spread. If MIT went public with this interest before Lockridge identified Aaliyah, the school could face scrutiny for academic negligence, racial bias, and obstruction. That same day, guidance counselor Mr. Farrell scheduled a one-on-one meeting with Aaliyah under the pretense of college preparedness. He smiled as she walked in. Just checking in, he said smoothly. Wanted to talk about your post-grad plans. Aaliyah blinked. I thought you said I should aim for state schools. He laughed. That was earlier in the year. You've been making great strides. Aaliyah didn't respond. She watched him closely, aware of the sudden change in tone. Farrell leaned in. Tell me, have you ever thought about MIT? She stiffened. Why? She asked. Oh, just curious. It's always good to aim high. And there's been some interest from their office in one of our students. We're just trying to match the name with the submission. Aaliyah didn't flinch, but her silence said everything. Farrell's smile faded slightly. So you did submit the napkin. A pause. Then, softly, yeah. Farrell exhaled. Well then, he said, tapping his pen. I'll inform the administration. But just between us, these kinds of opportunities can be overwhelming. High pressure, elite environments. We just want to make sure you're ready. There it was again, that soft racism wrapped in concern. The quiet implication that she might break under the weight of excellence. Aaliyah stood up. I'll be fine, she said, and left. Back in the front office, Farrell typed a quick message to Lang. Confirmed. It's Wren, but she's defensive. Proceed carefully. Meanwhile, Miss Grace Halton walked past the teacher's lounge and overheard snippets of the conversation. Never would have expected it. You sure it's her? Still can't believe MIT is taking it seriously. She clenched her jaw. They didn't celebrate her brilliance. They were afraid of it. Afraid of what it said about them. That they'd failed to see it. That they'd dismissed it. That she'd become more than they ever allowed her to be. That afternoon, the school sent an official response to MIT, confirming the student's identity as Aaliyah Wren. They included her grades, teacher evaluations, and transcripts, curated to present her as a safe, humble success story. But one line stood out in Dr. Lamont's inbox. While Aaliyah is a diligent and respectful student, we caution against overestimating the significance of her sketch without further context. Lamont frowned. She forwarded the email to her team with one sentence. They're trying to minimize her. Across the country, gears were shifting. And at Lockridge, the administration gathered behind closed doors, preparing their next move. They knew MIT would want to speak with Aaliyah. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that someone else had already reached out. Someone unexpected, someone powerful. MIT requests to speak with the student behind the sketch, but the school has no idea who drew it. The confirmation that Aaliyah Wren was the creator of the mysterious napkin sketch didn't spark celebration inside Lockridge High. It triggered a quiet panic. Dr. Everett Lang was the first to voice it in a closed-door meeting with Principal Marston and a few key board members. She couldn't have done this alone, he said flatly, tapping his fingers against the printout of the napkin scan. It's beyond high school comprehension. Even I had to reread it 3 times. And yet MIT is treating it like it's a doctoral-level submission. Principal Marston replied, his voice taut. They're requesting a formal evaluation of her abilities. Lang leaned back in his seat, his tone sharpening. Before we endorse her as a genius, we need to ensure this wasn't plagiarized. It's not unheard of, students pulling from obscure online academic journals, or even ghostwriting services. Plagiarism, the superintendent echoed. You're saying she faked this? I'm saying, Lang said, carefully, we should be sure before we put the school's reputation behind her. The media attention could be catastrophic if it turns out she lifted this. The room went quiet. No one wanted to be the one to say it aloud. They didn't believe a quiet black girl from the margins of their school could be capable of brilliance. So instead they framed it as due diligence. That afternoon, an internal academic review was quietly launched. Aaliyah wasn't told, but she felt it. The change in how teachers looked at her. The extra attention in class. The subtle way her tests were double-checked. Questions that used to be skimmed were now scrutinized. Her homework was now randomly selected for review. Her notebooks requested for standard compliance. She kept her head down and complied. But inside, the betrayal settled deep. It wasn't curiosity that surrounded her. It was doubt wrapped in politeness. And then came the unspoken insult, the challenge. Dr. Lang approached her during third period with a thin smile. I'd like you to try something, he said, handing her a sealed envelope. Inside, a printout of an abstract equation sourced from a top-tier graduate thesis, modified just enough to make the solution unusually complex. Take your time, he said. No pressure. Aaliyah read it once. Her eyes darted across the symbols. Her breath slowed. By the end of the day, she handed back the envelope with the solution written clearly, step by step, in her neat, slanted handwriting. Not only had she solved it, she had found a shorter route than the original author. Lang didn't admit it aloud, but his fingers trembled when he held the paper. Still, he wasn't convinced. Not fully. So he made a call. A confidential one. To the district board, framing it as a precautionary review. He claimed the possibility of outside influence and requested oversight. This time, the pressure wasn't subtle. Aaliyah was pulled from class by misread, the academic affairs advisor. We'd like to see you work through one of your equations, she said gently. On the whiteboard. Aaliyah blinked. Why? Just to verify your thought process. The room she was brought into had 3 observers, Dr. Lang, Miss Reed, and Mr. Farrell. No explanation. No encouragement. Just expectation. On the board, Lang had written a partially reconstructed version of her napkin sketch. Deliberately incomplete. Can you finish this? He asked. Aaliyah hesitated. It wasn't that she couldn't. It was that the version on the board was wrong. It was missing key steps, deliberately misaligned. But she didn't argue. She picked up the marker, drew a line through his flawed construction, and started fresh. Quietly, methodically. She didn't speak as she worked. Her eyes narrowed as she moved between recursion patterns, built out the lattice, annotated step changes in logic. As her hand moved, the board filled with the flow of something that couldn't be memorized, something only born from deep understanding. When she stepped back 20 minutes later, the room was silent. No one could follow what she had done. Not in full. But one thing was clear. She hadn't copied anything. She wasn't regurgitating. She was building. Dr. Lang cleared his throat. We'll review it. Aaliyah didn't wait for a thank you. She left without a word. That evening, her work was emailed, without her knowledge, to a neutral third party for analysis. MIT's request was looming, and Lockridge was desperate to control the narrative. They needed validation. But not from her. From each other. And then, something none of them expected happened. MIT sent back a challenge. It came from Dr. Lamont herself. Before we proceed, her email read, we'd like your math department to solve one of the sequences from the original napkin sketch. For context, please provide your full solutions within 48 hours. It was a trap. A fair one. But a trap nonetheless. Lang tried first. He stared at the equation for over an hour before realizing he didn't know where to begin. The structure was foreign, not in content, but in rhythm. It didn't follow textbook logic. It followed intuition, creativity, the kind of math that existed beyond formula. He passed it to his colleagues. None could solve it. One even suggested it might be nonsensical, until MIT sent back a correction. The sequence was accurate and verified by their graduate team. Lang's palms sweated. They couldn't do it. But the girl they doubted could. The next morning, Aaliyah arrived early, just as the sun pierced through the east windows. The hallway was quiet, but not empty. At the end of the corridor stood a man in a tailored blazer, checking his phone. He was tall, black, mid-30s, and out of place, too sharply dressed for Lockridge's usual crowd. He noticed her, smiled, nodded. "Morning," he said casually. She nodded back, unsure who he was. He didn't explain. In Dr. Lang's class that day, Aaliyah found the same equation, written across the whiteboard, the one the department had failed to solve. This time, Lang offered no condescension. "We'd like your approach on this," he said stiffly. There was no audience, just her and the board. She took the marker and began again. This time she didn't just solve it. She expanded it, improved the efficiency of the original model, introduced a recursive shortcut, and annotated it in language no one had taught her, but that MIT's team would recognize instantly. When she stepped away from the board, she turned to face them. Lang didn't speak. He simply stared. But outside the classroom door, unnoticed, the sharply dressed man, MIT recruiter Julian Cross, had been watching through the narrow hallway window. He had seen enough. As Aaliyah walked past him in the hallway an hour later, Julian waited until she was out of sight, then stepped outside into the parking lot. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Yeah," he said into the receiver. "It's her, the real deal." He paused. "Start prepping the fast-track package. Full ride. I want her in Cambridge before the end of the year." A math recruiter visiting Lockridge sees her solution and makes a confidential call from his car. The call came on a Wednesday morning, crisp and direct. Dr. Keisha Lamont herself had requested a formal virtual meeting with Aaliyah Wren. Not a general info session, not a recruitment webinar. A one-on-one with the Department of Theoretical Mathematics and MIT's Office of Advanced Youth Admissions. Lockridge's front office buzzed with emails and blinking phones by noon. And for a moment, it felt like it could be a victory, like someone at this school might actually call it what it was. A breakthrough. But that moment passed quickly, because before the email could even be forwarded to Aaliyah's family, it landed in the inbox of Principal Marston, who called an emergency administrative meeting to strategize the school's response. Strategize. Not celebrate. Not support. Strategize. "We cannot let this move too quickly," Marston said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "We haven't confirmed full academic vetting. If MIT wants a formal meeting, we need time to review all her materials again." "She passed the internal challenge," misread reminded him. "And the entire department failed it," muttered Mr. Kessler, the assistant principal. Lang didn't speak right away. He looked tired, restless, less arrogant than usual, but no less protective of his ego. "I just want to make sure we're not being used as a political symbol," he said finally. "Meaning?" asked Reed. Lang glanced at the others, then back down at the printed email in his hands. "Meaning, let's not pretend MIT isn't under pressure to showcase diversity. A black female student from a small-town school, suddenly being labeled a prodigy. The media loves stories like that." No one challenged him. Not directly. But Miss Reed leaned back in her chair and said quietly, "Or maybe she's just that good." Lang's jaw flexed. "She's gifted, yes, but she's also unpolished, unstructured. She's never been in competition settings, never published, never even presented publicly. We could be setting her up to fail, and that would reflect poorly on her and on us." So it wasn't about protecting Aaliyah. It was about protecting themselves. The decision was made. Delay the process. Frame it as additional preparation. Stall the meeting request with polite scheduling conflicts. Offer to curate Aaliyah's materials before forwarding them. And above all, control the narrative. That afternoon, Dr. Lang met with Aaliyah alone. He wore a softer smile than usual, the kind adults use when they think they're guiding a child away from something too big for them. "I wanted to congratulate you," he said. "It's rare for a student to catch MIT's attention this early." "Thank you," Aaliyah said carefully. "But I want to caution you," he continued. "They can be intense, rushed. Sometimes they spotlight students before they're truly ready." Aaliyah didn't answer. Lang clasped his hands. "We're here to support you, but this opportunity could become overwhelming. We've seen bright students buckle under the spotlight." "I'm not them," Aaliyah said quietly. Lang nodded, ignoring her resistance. "Which is why I'd like you to consider waiting. Maybe reapplying next year. Build a portfolio. Let us help you shape your voice before you step into a place like MIT." Aaliyah stared at him, face blank. She understood now. They weren't afraid she'd fail. They were afraid she'd succeed without them. Meanwhile at home, Aaliyah Wren was reading the forwarded message from MIT, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and vindication. She held the paper in both hands, sitting at the edge of the couch. "They want to meet with you," she said softly, looking at her daughter. Aaliyah nodded. "I know. But the school hasn't confirmed a date. They said I should wait. That they'll let me know when it's official." Jolene folded the paper in half slowly. "We're not waiting." That night she emailed MIT directly using the contact information in the footer. To me at Outreach. Subject: Re-meeting with Aaliyah Wren. Message: Hello. This is Aaliyah's mother. We were told the school is handling scheduling, but we'd like to connect directly if possible. We're eager to move forward and are available anytime. Warm regards, Aaliyah Wren. The next morning, MIT replied. They hadn't heard anything back from Lockridge since their initial request. That was the final confirmation. The school was stalling. Jolene didn't wait. She called the number directly. Within an hour, the meeting was scheduled. MIT offered a private Zoom room, bypassing the school entirely. Aaliyah would speak directly with the admissions board the following Thursday. When the email landed in the school inbox confirming the meeting had been set independently, panic hit the admin wing like a thunderclap. Marston called Lang into his office. "She went around us." Lang's face darkened. "They're moving too fast. They're taking away our control." Lang's voice dropped. "Then maybe we offer her a better path." And so began the Whisper campaign. It started with soft meetings, counseling support, suggestions to apply to state schools, as backups. Warnings about MIT's pressure. "They're not known for nurturing students like you." Then came the veiled comments. "We've seen students get crushed under expectations. It's okay to say no to things you're not ready for. You're smart, Aaliyah, but MIT is different." Still, she held her ground, until the email arrived. It came to Jolene's personal inbox, from a private domain. Not the school, not a known administrator. Subject line: Alternative pathways. Let her thrive. The message was brief. "We understand your daughter is being pursued by MIT, but consider what's truly best for her development. There are other more culturally supportive programs that prioritize mental health, family stability, and gradual progress over raw pressure. We'd be happy to connect you with donors who support young Black women in science, outside of the Ivy pipeline. MIT can be cruel. Let her grow elsewhere. Confidentially yours, a supporter who cares." There was no name, no return phone number, just a soft threat wrapped in concern. Jolene's hands shook as she read it twice. The message wasn't about support. It was about diversion. It was a quiet attempt to redirect her daughter away from greatness. She showed the email to Aaliyah that night. They sat in silence. Then Jolene said, her voice steely, "They're scared of you." Aaliyah looked at her mother. "So what do we do?" Jolene didn't blink. "We don't flinch." She forwarded the message to the MIT recruiter with one line. "Please be advised. Someone is trying to steer my daughter away from your offer. We're moving forward." Unapologetically, Aaliyah's mother receives a strange email, offering alternative paths, and warns her to keep Aaliyah away from MIT. MIT's admissions office ran on precision numbers, transcripts, test scores, and algorithms that rarely made mistakes. But sometimes a single paragraph could change a life. That's what the request for recommendation letters was supposed to be. A formality. Aaliyah's interview had gone beautifully. She spoke about pattern theory, the philosophy of equations, and the way numbers breathe in rhythm. The board had been stunned, especially Dr. Lamont, who couldn't help but think of herself 20 years earlier, fighting for legitimacy in rooms that didn't want her brilliance to exist. But policy was policy. They needed official endorsements from her school before final approval. Dr. Lamont emailed Lockridge's principal directly. "Dear Principal Marston, we are in the final review phase for Miss Aaliyah Wren. Kindly provide 2 academic recommendations, one from her math instructor and one from a general teacher." The reply arrived within hours. "Of course, Dr. Lamont. We'll ensure that happens immediately." Inside the walls of Lockridge High, the tone was very different. Principal Marston printed the email, carried it down to Dr. Lang's classroom, and shut the door behind him. Lang looked up from his desk, wary. "They want letters already?" "Yes," Marston said. "2. Yours and whoever else we choose. But Everett." He paused. "These letters will represent the school. They have to be careful. We don't want to sound reactionary." Lang's lips curled slightly, meaning we don't want to sound like we're overcompensating. Exactly. He nodded. Don't worry. I'll be objective. Objective. That word, so clinical, so neutral, had become the perfect disguise for bias. Lang sat down that afternoon to write the letter. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, not out of uncertainty, but calculation. He knew what he was doing, and what he wanted MIT to think. To whom it may concern, Aaliyah Wren is a bright, polite, and diligent young woman. She has demonstrated strong persistence in her coursework and respect for authority. While her methods are sometimes unconventional, she shows promise when guided with structure. With continued mentorship, she may thrive in a supportive learning environment. However, I believe she is still developing the confidence necessary to handle the competitive rigor of elite academic institutions. I recommend her with measured enthusiasm, and the hope that she finds the right balance between creativity and discipline. Sincerely, Dr. Everett Lang. He leaned back in his chair, rereading the letter. Every word sounded complimentary, on the surface, but the subtext was poison. Respect for authority, guided with structure, measured enthusiasm. It was the kind of polite sabotage academia had perfected. Marston approved it immediately. For the second letter they selected Mr. Farrell, the same counselor who had once told Aaliyah to aim local. His letter was shorter, but no less damaging. Aaliyah is a quiet yet diligent student, who shows strong potential in foundational mathematics. She often works alone, and occasionally struggles to articulate complex ideas verbally, though her written work shows effort and care. I believe she would excel in environments that offer nurturing mentorship and structured pacing, rather than high-pressure competition. When both letters were sent, Lang sat back with satisfaction. The school's conscience was clear. They hadn't lied, they'd just chosen a truth designed to limit her. Days later, MIT's Office of Admissions received the documents. When Dr. Lamont opened the first one, her brow furrowed. When she opened the second, her frown deepened. The other professors gathered around her desk, reading in silence. Measured enthusiasm, one murmured. Nurturing mentorship. These aren't recommendations, said another. They're warnings. Dr. Lamont closed her laptop and stared out the window for a long time. She'd seen this before, dozens of times, recommendation letters that praised manners but not brilliance, dress discrimination and soft language, the kind that always ended with "she's not ready yet." She took a slow breath. Pull her file, she said. A few minutes later, Aaliyah's interview transcript appeared on screen. The contrast was glaring. Her words were precise, her reasoning mature, her thought process ahead of her age group. She wasn't merely ready. She was exceptional. Someone's trying to hold her back, Dr. Lamont said quietly. Her assistant nodded. Should we call the school? No, Lamont replied. Not yet. We'll handle this differently. Meanwhile, Aaliyah had no idea her future was hanging by a few paragraphs of polite sabotage. She spent that week buried in notebooks, sketching formulas between classes. MIT had become her distant star, something she could feel but not touch yet. Her classmates whispered as she passed. Did you hear? MIT might take her. No way. They're just being political. She's not even top of the class. It didn't matter how much she achieved. The rules for her were always different. She wasn't judged by what she built, but by how comfortable her brilliance made others feel. By Friday, Dr. Lang stopped pretending to hide his skepticism. I heard you're waiting on a final decision, he said almost casually, as she packed her bag. Yes, sir. Well, he said, standing by the board. Just remember, sometimes universities get caught up in trends. Diversity optics. It's not always personal. Don't get discouraged if it doesn't work out. She froze. There it was. The mask slipping. The word he'd wanted to use all along. Token. Aaliyah didn't look up. I'm not anyone's optics, she said softly. Lang gave a tight smile. Of course not. I just want you prepared for reality. When she left, he erased the board too hard, the chalk smearing into gray streaks. At MIT, the admissions review had reached a quiet turning point. Dr. Lamont pulled in 2 senior reviewers and a third-party educational consultant to analyze the letters for implicit bias. The results were as damning as she expected. The language coded Aaliyah as submissive, dependent, and lacking independence, classic linguistic markers of racial bias in academic evaluation. Lamont sat back, tapping her pen. We're not going to let this stand. She drafted her own internal memo to the admissions board. Based on linguistic review and independent assessment, the submitted recommendations reflect institutional bias inconsistent with student performance and self-demonstrated aptitude. I recommend moving forward with full scholarship consideration, pending further investigation. Her assistant hesitated. Won't that cause friction with the school? It should, Lamont said. They earned it. 3 days later, Lockridge High received a follow-up call.
This time, not from an admissions officer from MIT's Equity Review Division.
Principal Marston answered on speakerphone, flanked by Lang and Farrell. This is unusual, Marston began. Is there an issue? We're simply verifying context, said the voice on the line. We'd like to confirm that the language used in your recommendation letters accurately reflects Ms. Wren's capabilities. Lang stiffened. Our letters were professional. Oh, they were, the voice replied smoothly. Just not accurate. There was a long pause. Lang finally said, Are you suggesting bias? I'm suggesting misjudgment, the voice replied. But don't worry, we've already moved forward. MIT will reach out directly to Ms. Wren's family. The call ended before they could respond. Lang turned to Marston, face pale. They went around us. For the first time, Marston didn't have an answer. That evening, MIT sent Aaliyah's mother an official notice. Aaliyah was under full review consideration for an advanced youth research fellowship. It wasn't just an offer, it was a potential full-ride research-backed pathway designed for prodigies. But the true twist came 2 days later. Dr. Lamont received an email from an external address, one she hadn't seen in years. Heard about the Wren case. Mind if I stop by? XB. Her eyebrows rose. Xavier Braxton. The name still carried weight across MIT's alumni network. A billionaire tech philanthropist, alumnus of the Institute, and one of its most private benefactors. He was known for one thing, quietly funding black excellence, in spaces that once shut him out. When he arrived on campus, Lamont met him in the faculty lounge. Is it true, he asked. The school tried to bury her? Lamont nodded, letters full of backhanded praise. But she's the real deal. Braxton smiled slowly. Then it's time I met her myself. A mysterious alumni donor from MIT steps in to investigate personally. Xavier Braxton wasn't known for speeches. He preferred to act quietly, behind closed doors, away from the flashing cameras and think piece headlines. But every now and then, a story cut too close, too personal, too familiar. A story like Aaliyah Wren. Her name had been forwarded to him by an old friend at MIT. No fluff, no PR. Just a subject line. Remind you of anyone? He read the file 3 times. Her napkin sketch, her interview transcript, the so-called recommendations, the polite sabotage. It was his story, rewritten 30 years ago. Xavier had sat in classrooms that barely looked at him. Professors who couldn't pronounce his name without smirking. Group projects where he did all the work, but someone else got the credit. He was called angry when he spoke up. Unfocused when he did. When he applied to graduate programs, one advisor wrote, shows passion, but lacks academic maturity. Better suited for technical support roles. He'd never forgotten it. That same advisor was now retired. Xavier had built 3 companies since then, patented 7 algorithms, and sat on boards that turned ideas into billion-dollar ecosystems. Still, he never chased validation. He chased access. He believed in brilliance that didn't beg for permission. That's why he built the Shadow Circuit, a quiet, well-funded network that identified young, underrepresented prodigies before the system crushed them. He'd funded robotics champions from rural Georgia, chess masters from Newark, even a biocoder from an Ohio group home. And now, he'd found the next one. Aaliyah Wren. He studied her photos. A small, quiet girl, with focused eyes and a guarded jawline. Her brilliance wasn't loud, it was architectural, layered, deliberate. The kind that couldn't be faked, the kind that got buried. She hadn't asked for help. That made him want to help her more. At MIT, Dr. Keisha Lamont met with him the morning after he landed. You read the letters? She asked. I did. She doesn't even know they're holding her back. She doesn't need to know, Xavier said. Not yet. First, I want to see it for myself. Lamont raised a brow. You're going to the school? I want to walk those halls, feel what she feels, see how they look at her. She paused. They'll recognize your name. They won't see it. I'm going in under a different one. He opened his phone and tapped an assistant. Set up a school tour at Lockridge High, he said. Name, Nathan Harlow. Parent researching schools for my daughter. Schedule it discreetly. Within hours, the appointment was booked. Tour scheduled. visitor badge waiting. No one at Lockridge knew the man who would walk through their halls the next morning had more power than the entire school board combined. Meanwhile, Aaliyah sat in her room, sketching a new equation. Her mother cooked dinner downstairs, humming to the gospel radio, unaware that their lives were about to tilt again. Aaliyah's mind was clear, but heavy. The letters, the silence, the feeling of being watched, measured, doubted. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know someone powerful was watching back, not to doubt, but to protect. At 10 a.m. the next morning, a black SUV pulled into the Lockridge visitor parking lot. Out stepped Nathan Harlow, dressed in a charcoal coat and a plain black sweater, clean shave, neutral expression, nothing flashy, just another dad touring the school. The front desk buzzed him in. Ms. Reyes, the assistant administrator, greeted him with a brochure. "Welcome to Lockridge." She smiled. "You said you're looking for a placement for your daughter next year." "Yes," he said smoothly. "We're relocating from New York. I heard the math program here is rigorous." She laughed politely. "One of our strongest departments, nationally ranked." He followed her through the front entrance, past the trophy case lined with sports medals and debate plaques. Nothing about math, nothing about science, nothing about the napkin. As they walked, Xavier scanned the walls. The subtle signs, posters of smiling white student of the month boards, not a single black face. He felt the old chill again, the one that had followed him through every whitewashed hallway in his own youth. "Do you offer academic support for introverted students?" he asked casually. Reyes smiled. "A little too tightly. We encourage all students to participate actively. Those who struggle socially often benefit from peer mentorship." Translation: fit in, or get left behind. Xavier took mental notes. They passed a classroom with the door cracked open. Inside, a white student was loudly explaining a problem on the board. Wrong, while the teacher nodded patiently. 2 rows back, a black girl scribbled quietly, unseen. He tapped his phone, snapped a discrete photo. Later he'd enhance it, zoom in, confirm what he already felt. This place didn't reward accuracy. It rewarded performance. As they approached the math wing, Reyes stopped outside room 3. "Our lead instructor, Dr. Lang, is just finishing up. He could speak to you for a moment." "Actually," Xavier said gently, "I'd like to see the student spaces. Where they think, where they dream. May I walk around alone for a few?" Reyes hesitated. "Of course. Just check in before you leave." He nodded and continued on his own. When he turned the corner to the 3rd-floor stairwell, he paused. There, beneath the flickering exit sign, sat a girl with braids, bent over a notebook, pencil moving in rhythmic strokes. "Aaliyah." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He watched from a distance as she sketched a spiral sequence. Geometric, recursive, elegant. There was no audience, no one watching, just a girl and her brilliance, breathing on the page. He left quietly. Outside, in the safety of his SUV, Xavier pulled out his phone and made the call. To Lamont. "It's worse than we thought," he said. "This school doesn't just ignore her. They're trying to erase her." Lamont exhaled. "Do we go public?" "Not yet," Xavier said. "First, we give her options. And if the school pushes back," he looked out the window, eyes narrowed. "Then we push harder." Xavier schedules a surprise visit to Lockridge High, under a fake name. It started as a whisper, a passing comment in a local cafe. "You hear about that math girl? The black one. School tried to bury her." Melissa Vane, a junior reporter at the Southfield Tribune, overheard it while sipping burnt coffee during her off day. She leaned in, instinct flickering. The city was small. Stories didn't often come wrapped in race, genius, and scandal, at least not all at once. That afternoon, she began her own quiet dig. The first call went to the district office. "I heard Lockridge High has a student who caught MIT's attention. A scholarship, maybe." The secretary stammered. "Oh yes. Well, I believe that's in process." Nothing confirmed. Second call. "Lockridge High. Can I speak with your academic advisor about a student's success feature?" They transferred her to voicemail. Twice. Melissa tried something else. She emailed MIT's admissions office directly, citing interest in covering underrepresented students in STEM. Within hours, she received a brief but loaded reply from an anonymous MIT staffer. "There's a story here. And it's not just about math." Melissa booked a meeting with her editor. "This girl's name is Aaliyah Wren. she said, spreading printouts on the desk. She submitted a math sketch, napkin paper. MIT said it showed genius-level thinking. The school downplayed it. Recommendations were sabotaged. But MIT moved forward anyway. Her editor raised an eyebrow. You verified all that? Working on it. But it's consistent. Every road leads to her, and there's a weird silence from the school. All right, he nodded. Dig. But clean. We run this. It better be airtight. By Friday, Melissa had requested an in-person visit to Lockridge. Principal Marston didn't take it well. A journalist, he said, pacing his office. We can't have someone walking through the halls looking for dirt. She's asking for a quote, said Miss Reed. If we refuse, it'll look like we're hiding something. Dr. Lang stepped in. Then we control the story. Highlight our support. Downplay the controversy. So when Melissa arrived Monday morning, the school was already rehearsing its mask. Posters of Aaliyah's face printed in full color were taped to the walls, celebrating STEM excellence. A rising star. Aaliyah walked past them in silence, her stomach twisting. No one had asked her permission. No one had told her. The girl they once dismissed now had her face weaponized as PR. Melissa spotted her outside the library. Aaliyah? Aaliyah turned slowly. Her eyes measured the woman. I'm a journalist, Melissa said gently. Local paper. I'm writing a piece about your journey. If you're willing to talk. I don't think I'm supposed to, Aaliyah said, glancing around. You don't have to, Melissa said. But you should know, the world is watching, and your voice matters more than theirs right now. Aaliyah didn't answer. But that night, she emailed Melissa, from an anonymous account. Subject. They're trying to silence me. Attached, a photo of her recommendation letter, leaked by a custodian with access to the admin printer. Melissa's piece ran online first. The hidden genius. They tried to ignore Aaliyah Wren in the silence of Lockridge High. It spread fast. Within 48 hours, it had 200,000 shares. National outlets picked it up. Influencers reposted. Black academics launched threads of support. Even celebrities tweeted her name with hashtags like "Let her rise" and "The math is black too." The praise came fast, but so did the retaliation. On Tuesday morning, Aaliyah's locker was covered in red marker. Plagiarist. Quota queen. MIT. Minority infiltration tactic. The janitor cleaned it in silence. No one was punished. That afternoon, she was quietly pulled from the regional math competition she'd been slated to win. Logistical reasons, Lang told her. Too much attention right now. We're protecting you. She didn't respond. She just left the room. By Thursday, the Wren family received an unmarked envelope in their mailbox. No return address. No name. Inside, a printed screenshot of a fake online forum post claiming Aaliyah's work was being reviewed for academic dishonesty. Underlined in pen. Careful where you send your daughter. MIT can ruin people. Jolene went to the principal's office with the paper. Marston shrugged. It didn't come from us. So you're not going to protect her? She demanded. She's being celebrated, he said calmly. We've featured her. We're supporting her. Jolene narrowed her eyes. You're using her. That night, Jolene checked the mail again. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was worse. A formal envelope from Child Protective Services. Subject: allegation of educational neglect and emotional coercion. Aaliyah stood frozen as her mother read aloud. It has come to our attention that the child, Aaliyah Wren, may be experiencing academic pressure and isolation stemming from inappropriate parental influence and harmful expectations. Aaliyah's voice cracked. They're saying you're forcing me? Jolene's eyes filled with fury. They're trying to build a case. The next morning, a CPS agent showed up unannounced. Professional smile, clipboard in hand. Just a routine follow-up, she said. No one's in trouble. But the questions were anything but innocent. Does your mom help you with your math? Do you feel pressured to succeed? Has anyone asked you to lie about your work? Aaliyah sat on the couch, answering calmly, but inside she was shaking. This wasn't about care. This was an attempt to disqualify her, from brilliance, from MIT, from rising. The agent left with a neutral tone. We'll be in touch. Aaliyah went to her room and didn't speak for the rest of the night. By Monday, the MIT interview was scheduled. Zoom. Her mother cleaned the living room. Aaliyah wore her best shirt, hair tied back neatly. Her notebook sat beside her, filled with patterns she had sketched to explain. At school, she stayed focused, tried to ignore the stares, the whispers, the stinging feeling of being watched by both enemies and allies. Then, at 1:47 p.m., just as the final bell rang, two uniformed officers stepped into room 3. The class froze. "Is there an Aaliyah Wren here?" one asked. Aaliyah stood slowly, heart pounding. "Yes, come with us please." "No explanation?" Lang asked, eyes wide, trying to mask surprise. "Confidential matter," one officer said curtly. They led her out the door, past the trophy case, past the murals that now bore her photo, past the journalists who were just starting to arrive. Her backpack was still in the classroom. Her Zoom interview was 13 minutes away. She was gone. Aaliyah is pulled from class by police. Right before her MIT Zoom interview, the car ride was silent. Aaliyah sat in the back seat of the patrol car, hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at the gray plastic partition between her and the officers. The engine's hum filled the space like static, low and cold. Her backpack had been left behind at school, her laptop, her notes, even the small napkin sketch that started everything. All gone. Outside, the town blurred into a wash of red lights, an afternoon drizzle. In the front seat, one officer whispered to the other, thinking she couldn't hear. "Can you believe this? 16 and already scamming MIT. She looks too young to even understand that stuff. Parents probably pushing her. Happens all the time." Aaliyah's fingers dug into her palms. She didn't cry. She just stared out the window, the reflection of her own face faint in the glass. Dark eyes, steady, unbroken. When the car stopped, she expected to be taken to the station. Instead, they drove her to the Child Welfare Annex, a small beige building tucked between a courthouse and a church. The sign read, Department of Youth and Family Integrity. Her mother, Jolene, was already there. She stood in the lobby, surrounded by two social workers and a woman with a badge clipped to her belt. The look on her face was fierce and exhausted, the kind of anger that grows under pressure but doesn't break. "Mom!" Aaliyah ran forward, but one of the officers stopped her halfway. "Ma'am, please stay calm. We just need to ask a few questions. You're detaining a minor without counsel." Jolene snapped. "For what reason?" The woman with the badge stepped forward. "Mrs. Wren, there's been a formal complaint alleging potential educational neglect and academic fraud. The state has to investigate." "Fraud?" Jolene repeated. "You're accusing my daughter of being too smart?" "Ma'am, please." "No, you listen," Jolene said, voice rising. "You don't pull a child out of school in front of her classmates for something like this. You don't treat genius like a crime." The woman folded her arms. "Then you shouldn't have submitted fraudulent materials to MIT." Aaliyah's head snapped up. "I didn't." All eyes turned to her. The woman studied her, like a specimen, not a person. "You're telling us you created those equations yourself?" "Yes." "Without help?"
Yes.
"Without copying, consulting, or referencing external publications?" Aaliyah hesitated. "I've read books, watched lectures. I study everything I can." The woman's tone sharpened. "But you're not enrolled in any advanced programs?"
No.
"So how would you even understand the content?" Aaliyah looked her directly in the eye. "By thinking." For a brief second, the room went silent. The woman blinked. "All right," she said briskly. "We'll need to see your work." They were led into a sterile interview room with glass walls and humming fluorescent lights. A table, two chairs, a stack of blank paper. "Draw it," the woman said. "The same equations. Let's see if you can." Jolene bristled. "She's not your lab rat." Aaliyah touched her mother's hand gently. "It's okay." She sat down, took the pencil, and began to write. The officers watched from behind the glass. At first the pencil scratched softly, hesitant, rhythmic. Then faster. Lines, curves, ratios. A map of thought unfolding like choreography. It wasn't rote memorization. It was living logic. Within minutes, the paper filled with lattice-like structures, recursive series that looped into elegant symmetries. She wasn't recreating her old napkin sketch. She was building new ones. When she finished, she pushed the pages forward. The lead investigator frowned. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's a pattern function," Aaliyah said quietly. "It models expansion through self-similarity, like the way roots grow, or the way sound echoes. You can use it to predict growth behavior in energy systems." The officer chuckled softly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but that doesn't sound real." Jolene leaned forward. "You don't have to understand it for it to be real." The investigator ignored her and looked at Aaliyah. "Tell me, who helped you write this?" "A tutor," Someone online? Aaliyah shook her head. I told you. It's mine. The officer leaned against the glass, muttering under his breath. Kids these days think Google makes them geniuses. But one of the younger officers, Officer Daniel Ruiz, didn't join in. He'd been silent since they arrived, watching quietly from the corner. There was something in his expression, a flicker of curiosity that cut through the skepticism. He moved closer. Explain this part to me, he said, pointing to one section of the page. Aaliyah turned the paper toward him. That's where the symmetry locks. The recursion resets every 7 iterations. It looks like chaos, but it's actually stabilizing. He tilted his head. Can you show me with an example? She pulled a napkin from the box on the table. Old habits. If you take sound waves, like the hum from that light, each one decays, but not evenly. My model predicts when it'll fade completely. She tapped the table once. Ruiz leaned in. Show me. She sketched again, fast, fluid. Her hands moved with certainty. And for the first time, Ruiz saw what the others didn't. Not arrogance, not defiance, but she wasn't pretending. She was working. When she finished, he asked, softly, did anyone teach you this? No, she said. But if I can see it, I can solve it. Something in his chest tightened. The others still didn't get it. The lead investigator leaned back, exasperated. You expect us to believe a teenager developed a formula like this alone? Aaliyah met her gaze evenly. You believe it when they're not black. The words hit the room like a dropped weight. No one moved. No one breathed. Jolene stared at her daughter, proud, scared, furious that she even had to say it. The investigator cleared her throat. That's not what this is about. Yes, it is, Jolene said coldly. If her name were Chad or Connor, you'd be nominating her for a state medal right now. The woman stood. Interview concluded. She gathered the papers into a folder, marking them as evidence. Jolene shot up. You can't take that. That's her work. It's part of the investigation. As they left the room, Aaliyah caught Officer Ruiz's eye. He hesitated, then gave her the faintest nod, the kind that meant I saw what you did. 2 hours later, they were released pending review. No charges, no formal apology, just silence. Outside, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. Rain came down in threads, soft and endless. Jolene unlocked the car door, but before getting in, she stopped and looked at her daughter. They're trying to make you small, she said. Don't let them. Aaliyah nodded. I won't. When they got home, Jolene went straight to her room and called the MIT liaison, her voice trembling but controlled. They detained her. They questioned her. They treated her like a criminal. Dr. Lamont listened in stunned silence. We'll handle it, she promised. Do not let them silence you. We're escalating this. Meanwhile, Officer Ruiz sat in his patrol car in the parking lot, the folder of paperwork resting on the passenger seat. His hands hovered over his phone. He replayed the image in his mind. The quiet confidence in that girl's eyes, as she solved equations no adult in the room understood. He picked up the evidence folder again. Inside were photocopies of her drawings. He flipped through them, paused and whispered to himself, Jesus Christ. Then, with a cautious glance around, he took out his phone, opened the camera app, and hit record. He started speaking into the lens. This is Officer Daniel Ruiz, ID number 7325. The following is documentation of what I witnessed today. He pointed the camera at the sketches. She solved these in real time. No assistance. The investigators laughed at her. They confiscated her work as evidence of fraud. He swallowed hard. I'm sending this where it can't be buried. He stopped recording, uploaded the file to a secure drive, and composed a short message. To admissions at E. Subject, urgent student verification footage. Attached a 92-second video file, labeled WRAN in real-time. He hit send. The screen blinked once. Message sent. Ruiz leaned back, heart pounding. He knew he'd just risked his job, but he also knew for the first time that day that justice might have a fighting chance. That officer sends the clip to someone at MIT without anyone else knowing. The video surfaced at 6:13 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, uploaded anonymously to a small forum for educators. It was initially captioned with no fanfare, Black teen solves advanced math while being accused of cheating. Within an hour, it had 400 views. By noon, it was on Reddit. By 3 p.m., it hit Twitter. And by midnight, it passed 10 million views. Aaliyah Wren, sitting under fluorescent lights in a cramped interview room, calmly drawing recursive functions while adults questioned her intelligence. There was no yelling, no profanity, no violence, just brilliance under interrogation. The internet didn't just watch, it ignited. Clips of Aaliyah breaking down complex math, her soft voice steady, flooded every platform. Professors stitched themselves explaining the theory she described. Engineers paused their workflows to analyze her napkin diagrams. PhDs in data science gasped at the clarity of her logic. The hashtags began trending globally.
Believe black girls.
Let her think. Wren was right. Genius in the room. By sunrise, her name was on national television. Who is Aaliyah Wren? CNN asked in a morning segment. She didn't yell. She didn't demand. One host said on MSNBC. She just solved equations they couldn't understand, and they called her a fraud. Influencers reposted it with fury. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The ACLU called it a clear example of systemic educational bias under the guise of policy. But it was what happened next that no one expected. Celebrities joined in. A Grammy-winning rapper tweeted, "This girl out here doing quantum math on a napkin while they interrogate her like a criminal? Nah. Protect Aaliyah Wren." A black astrophysicist posted a stitched reaction. Tears in her eyes. "This was me. This is me." Still, to this day, genius shouldn't have to scream to be heard. Even former President Barack Obama reposted the clip on Instagram. Quoting James Baldwin, "The place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it." Aaliyah, you're making it. Jolene Wren stood frozen in the middle of her kitchen, her phone shaking in her hand. "Baby," she whispered, turning the screen toward her daughter. "They're talking about you. All of them. All of them." Aaliyah didn't speak. She sat at the table, face pale, watching a world she never thought would notice her suddenly open its arms, not because she screamed, but because she quietly endured. That night, the doorbell rang. It wasn't CPS, it wasn't the police. It was Melissa Vane, the journalist who first reported her story, now standing next to a CNN field producer and a camera operator. "We're here for the interview," Melissa said gently. "If you're ready." Jolene hesitated. Aaliyah looked up, then nodded. The interview aired the next morning. Prime time. The world saw Aaliyah's story, not just the viral clip, but the history. The locker graffiti, the rescinded math competition, the surveillance, the missing letters, everything. By noon, it became one of the most watched interviews of the year. MIT admissions held an emergency faculty meeting. Dr. Keisha Lamont walked in holding a printout of the transcript.
"We're behind," she said. "The world sees it. Now we move."
Someone cleared their throat. "The school will claim her now. You know that, right?" Lamont didn't blink. "They already are." At Lockridge High, Principal Marston stood at a podium surrounded by local news outlets. The same school that had tried to quietly sideline Aaliyah now hosted a press conference under a banner reading, "Celebrating Excellence. Our rising scholar, Aaliyah Wren. We are proud," Marston said, camera lights flashing, "to support a student who reflects the values of perseverance and brilliance." Reporters clapped. Faculty smiled. And just behind them, Dr. Lang gave an interview of his own. "I always knew Aaliyah had potential," he said smoothly. "It's gratifying to see her growth."
Not a word about the napkin.
Not a word about the false accusations. Not a word about the sabotage. The PR machine had started. Inside the building, Aaliyah sat in the counselor's office, watching it live on a muted TV. "They didn't even say my name right," she said. Jolene touched her shoulder. "Let them lie. Everyone already knows the truth." Still, the weight pressed in. Visibility had come with a cost. For every message of praise, there were comments of doubt. Anonymous trolls questioning her scores. Think pieces asking whether media sympathy had propelled her success. Even now, even viral, she was still being filtered through suspicion. That afternoon, Melissa called. Her voice was tense. "You need to know something," she said. "What?" "A source just sent me proof that Lang and others edited your recommendation letters after the interview. They downgraded your file after MIT's initial response." Aaliyah's chest tightened. "So they tried to make me fail on purpose." "Yes. And now they're claiming credit for your success." Aaliyah was quiet for a long time. "Can you prove it?" "I will." That night, Melissa published a follow-up article titled, "The People Who Tried to Silence Aaliyah Wren, Now Applauding Her." It included screenshots, email timestamps, and anonymous faculty statements confirming the edits. The headline went global. Again, Suddenly, Lockridge wasn't just the school with the genius, it was the school that tried to erase her. By morning, the district's phone lines were jammed. Parents demanded resignations. The state board announced a review of Lockridge's leadership. And then at 7:11 a.m., a package arrived at Aaliyah's front door, unmarked. Inside, an embossed envelope. MIT seal. Hand signed. A letter to Aaliyah Wren. We are honored to formally offer you admission to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with a full scholarship, research residency, and faculty mentorship through the Lamont Quantum Acceleration Fellowship. Your brilliance stands alone. We hope you'll let it shine with us. She read it 3 times before saying anything. Her mother was crying. I knew, Jolene whispered. I always knew. But Aaliyah just stared at the letter. Because behind the honor, behind the headlines and hashtags, she had one thought. Why did I have to go through all that, just to be believed? MIT offers her not just admission, but a full scholarship and a research position. The MIT campus was colder than Aaliyah expected. Not just the weather, the wind-whipped streets, the icy stone archways, but the atmosphere. It wasn't unwelcoming. Not overtly. Her arrival had been celebrated. Flashbulbs clicked. Students applauded. A faculty coordinator met her at the gate, arms outstretched, smiling like she'd just discovered a comet. The dean personally handed her a welcome packet. Dr. Lamont hugged her like a mentor who knew what it cost to arrive. But even as she stood at the center of it, Aaliyah felt it. That quiet weight. Expectation on one shoulder. Doubt on the other. You're the girl from the video, right? A student asked. The first day of seminar. Blonde, confident, all teeth. The one who got interrogated? Yes. Wild, he said, then turned to his friend, whispering something that made them both chuckle. She kept walking.
The nickname spread fast.
Viral girl. Not math prodigy. Not young researcher. Not Aaliyah. They talked like she hadn't earned her spot. Like she'd been invited for the optics. In one lab, a white male student leaned over her notebook. You know, a lot of what you drew on that napkin looked like existing work. Did you ever publish anything? Just to, prove it's yours? Aaliyah didn't answer. She flipped the page and kept working. Some professors weren't much better. In lecture halls, they called her contributions interesting. With that thin tone, the kind used for students who they don't expect to actually shift the room. One assistant professor paused her during a presentation. Can you slow down, he said. We want to make sure everyone's following. Especially if you're using your own notation again. Laughter rippled across the class. Aaliyah smiled politely. My notation follows logic. If anyone's confused, I'm happy to walk them through it after. She didn't shrink. Not this time. Because she remembered Lockridge. She remembered being erased. She remembered what it cost to stay silent. So she built her own system. She didn't beg for inclusion. She created a space. She started holding off-record study sessions at the East Wing Commons. At first, just 3 students joined. 2 women from Brazil and a black engineering freshman named Jason. By mid-semester, the group had grown to 12. Then 20. Then 50. No formal sign-ups. Just a quiet invitation. A new kind of classroom. Here, people weren't measured by the speed of their answers, but by the questions they dared to ask. Aaliyah wasn't just solving equations. She was solving the culture. You don't talk much in lecture, Jason said one night. But here, you're the best teacher I've ever had. She nodded. They never saw me until it was too late. I won't let that happen to you. Her sessions became legend. Diagrams drawn on napkins, cafe windows, scraps of notebook paper. Students started calling her Professor Wren in jest. But MIT took notice. Dr. Lamont pulled her aside after a midterm review. You've changed more in 3 months than most of our fellows do in 2 years, she said. And I've nominated you for something. Aaliyah's eyes widened. What? The Global Symmetry Symposium, Lamont said. Paris. 3 weeks. You'd be the youngest speaker in its history. Aaliyah blinked. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Lamont smiled. That's what they want you to think. And just like that, the napkin sketch girl from Lockridge was about to present on a world stage. MIT sent the acceptance notice with fanfare. The school's internal newsletter ran a feature. Rising mind, from viral genius to global scholar. But praise comes with shadow. And some people, especially those who expect to always be the smartest in the room, don't handle disruption well. The whispers returned. Only this time, darker. She's not presenting real math. She just repackages what already exists. She's a diversity trophy, not a real researcher. A student anonymously posted to a campus forum. Should someone with no academic publications be allowed to represent us globally? The post got hundreds of comments. Many defended her. Others didn't. The night before her flight to Paris, she stayed up late packing. Her passport, her research notes, a notebook with all her napkin sketches reworked into slides. At 11:47 p.m., she received an anonymous email, no subject line, just a link. She clicked. A message board thread titled,
"What are your N, plagiarist?"
Dozens of users, anonymous handles, claiming she'd lifted concepts from obscure math blogs, that her work was derivative, that her models mimicked existing topology structures. They cited twisted half-truths, took screenshots out of context, linked to papers published after her sketches, but claimed they were first. The final comment read, "She fooled MIT. Let's see if she can fool the world." She stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Then her phone buzzed. "Melissa." "I saw it," she said. "They're trying to destroy you again." Aaliyah didn't speak. "You've done nothing wrong," Melissa said. "They're afraid of what you prove just by existing. Should I still go?" Melissa paused. "Absolutely. But you should know. This time they'll try harder." Aaliyah hung up and turned off her screen. She sat on the bed, silent, her flight a few hours away. The last time they tried to discredit her, they used adults in suits. Now they were using peers. But she wasn't the girl they dragged out of a classroom anymore. She was about to speak, globally, and this time, no one was going to erase her voice. She's selected to present at a global math symposium. But someone leaks false plagiarism rumors the night before. Aaliyah landed in Paris with her breath shallow in her chest. The symposium venue glistened like glass. Modern, towering, intimidating. Representatives from over 40 countries. Nobel laureates, AI theorists, mathematicians, whose papers she'd printed and annotated on the margins of her spiral-bound journals. She was scheduled to present on day 2, but by the end of day 1, everything had changed. An anonymous email had hit the inboxes of the symposium board, MIT's delegation, and dozens of attending scholars. Subject line: Urgent fraud alert. MIT's youngest presenter copied work. Attached a PDF comparing Aaliyah's recursive lattice model to a 2019 blog post on a European math forum. Obscure translated, niche. The post showed similar shapes. A sidebar accusation claimed Aaliyah's work appears nearly identical, suggesting lifted material. MIT's team froze. Dr. Lamont's phone buzzed with escalation alerts. Within an hour, the symposium committee issued a temporary hold on Aaliyah's presentation slot, pending MIT's internal review. She wasn't banned, but she was benched. The words stung. Temporary. Pending. Hold. It didn't matter that the accusation was vague. It didn't matter that Aaliyah had never heard of the blog. The seed had been planted. By midnight, the story was already leaking online. A Reddit thread titled, "The Paris Prodigy Might Be a Fraud," subtweeted by dozens of skeptics. Should have seen this coming. Affirmative action strikes again. She's just a TikTok algorithm with a face. Aaliyah sat in her hotel room, laptop open, screen buzzing, the city lights reflected in the window beside her. Fractured by tears she refused to let fall. Jolene called from back home. "Do you want to come back?" she asked gently. "No," Aaliyah said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was sharpened steel. "I want to fight." At 2:11 a.m., Aaliyah pulled out every notebook she'd ever filled. She had scanned backups on her drive, Dropbox folders with creation dates, time-stamped Google Docs, photos from her phone, napkins, whiteboards, textbook margins. She remembered something Dr. Lamont once told her. Proof is the language power can't argue with. So she built her case. Slide by slide, napkin by napkin, draft by draft. She created a chronological archive going back 4 years, labeled with dates, locations, context. A timeline of genius no one had seen because no one had cared to look. She submitted it to the MIT committee before dawn, and to the symposium board with a note. "You want to know if this is mine? I've been building it since before you thought I could."
Aaliyah Wren.
Lamont received the email first. She opened the drive, expecting to skim. Instead, she found herself in awe. The precision, the process, the clarity of growth from age 12 to 16. Mistakes, revisions, sudden leaps of understanding. It was a textbook of a mind no one had taught, but no one could deny. At 8:03 a.m., Lamont called the symposium director. She didn't plagiarize, she said. She evolved. The board responded quickly. Review ongoing. No formal reinstatement yet. Still holding her back. Still hedging. But something else was happening. This time, in public. Aaliyah posted the entire archive. She uploaded it to a site called wrenproof.com. Free access. No paywall. No filters. Her post read, "They told me to show my work. I always have. They just weren't looking." It exploded. Wrenproof trended within hours. Not just in America. In France. In Ghana. In Tokyo. People from around the world, young students, teachers, coders, and scholars, flooded to the site. They downloaded her files, compared her sketches to the plagiarized blog post, and it became undeniable. Aaliyah's models predated the forum entry. By over a year, she hadn't copied. The blog had mirrored her. A data scientist posted an analysis proving her timestamps using metadata. A copyright lawyer offered to file takedown notices on her behalf. A group of math teachers held an online live stream walking through her archive, step by step, showing how her brilliance grew, naturally, independently, undeniably. By that evening, even the most skeptical professors began to retreat. The symposium board sent a brief message. The plagiarism allegation is dismissed. Aaliyah Wren is reinstated for presentation. But they were too late. The world had already chosen. Aaliyah was no longer just a genius. She was a symbol of resilience, of proof, of unyielding truth. Back at Lockridge High, the news filtered slowly. Some students celebrated. Others remained silent. But inside the administrative wing, panic began to rise. Because while the world watched Aaliyah's vindication, MIT's internal team had begun investigating the source of the anonymous email. They traced the IP address through a series of dummy accounts and VPN chains. Someone had tried to cover their tracks. But one slip, a browser fingerprint, led back to a district network. From there, the audit found something chilling. The email that triggered Aaliyah's global suspension had been sent from Lockridge High. The source of the leak is traced back to Lockridge High. The email trace reached MIT's legal office by noon. The findings were clean, verified, and irrefutable. The anonymous plagiarism accusation that had nearly derailed Aaliyah's global presentation had originated not from a rival scholar, not from an online troll, but from a computer terminal registered to Lockridge High School. Specifically, Dr. Everett Lang's faculty account. The silence in the room when the discovery was announced was absolute. Lamont stood at the center of the boardroom table, arms folded, her jaw tight. "Forward the report," she said flatly, "to legal, and CC the equity division." "Should we contact the family first?" asked her assistant. "No," Lamont said. "I'm contacting someone else." She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Braxton," she said when the line clicked. "It's time." Xavier Braxton was in Atlanta when the call came through. He was reviewing funding reports for his nonprofit, the Shadow Circuit, when Lamont's words froze him mid-sentence.
Lockridge again, he said quietly.
"Yes. We traced the leak." He rubbed his temples. "You sure?" "Positive." "Then they're done." Within 48 hours, his legal team was mobilized. 5 attorneys specializing in educational discrimination, civil rights, and institutional negligence. But Xavier didn't want a single lawsuit. He wanted a reckoning. And this time he wasn't going to hide behind fake names or quiet donations. He was going to war. News broke on a Tuesday morning. MIT whistleblower. False claims against teen Prodigy traced back to Lockridge High faculty. It went viral instantly. Cable news. National outlets. Front page of the New York Times. Dr. Lang's name was plastered across headlines as the alleged origin of the anonymous email that attempted to undermine and defame a black student. Lockridge High tried to contain it, but the truth was out. The superintendent called it a tragic misunderstanding. The district board issued a vague statement about technical errors and miscommunication. But the damage was irreversible. Within 24 hours, Xavier Braxton stood in front of cameras, flanked by attorneys. He spoke slowly, clearly, and without notes. "For too long," he said, "brilliance has been buried under bias. This isn't about one student. This is about a system designed to mistake silence for inferiority and excellence for threat." The press leaned in. The weight of his words hung like thunder in the air. He announced a class action lawsuit on behalf of not only Aaliyah Wren, but dozens of current and former Lockridge students, all of whom had come forward in the days since the leak went public. Emails began flooding his team's inbox within hours. I was told to aim lower. They said college wasn't realistic. They changed my AP recommendation because my name didn't sound right. Students, parents, teachers of color. A flood of stories long suppressed, now roaring free. By Friday, 47 plaintiffs had joined. The suit alleged institutional negligence, systemic racial bias, and targeted academic suppression. It wasn't just about Aaliyah anymore. It was about a culture. At Lockridge High, the once proud hallways had turned into ground zero. Reporters outside, protesters chanting, students holding cardboard signs. Let black brains breathe. Education nil exclusion. Inside, Principal Marston's office looked like a bunker. Lang sat across from him, his usually crisp suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. They're painting me as a monster, he muttered. I didn't even— You sent that email, Marston interrupted sharply. You signed in on your terminal. I was testing a theory, Lang snapped. The post looked similar. I didn't want to embarrass the school. You've embarrassed everyone. Outside the door, Ms. Reed was quietly packing her things. She'd seen enough. When reporters asked if she'd testify, she said simply, yes. That night, Lang tendered his resignation. By morning it was on every network, but that wasn't enough for Xavier. He wanted structural change. Aaliyah watched it unfold from her dorm room. MIT had arranged a secure media liaison for her, but she hadn't spoken publicly since the Paris symposium. The lawsuit wasn't her idea. She hadn't demanded retribution. But her name, her story, was the engine driving the movement now. Every headline began with her. Aaliyah Wren case sparks national debate. The teen genius who shattered the education system. It felt surreal, like watching her own life become legend. Jolene visited on a Sunday and found her sitting at her desk, surrounded by notebooks. You're not eating, she said softly. Aaliyah smiled faintly. I'm writing everything down. Every detail. They're using my story in court. I want it to be right. Her mother touched her shoulder. You don't have to carry all this alone. Aaliyah looked up, her expression steady. If I don't, who will? The first hearing drew national coverage. Xavier's attorneys presented hard data, systemic grading discrepancies, racially coded teacher evaluations, and discriminatory college counseling patterns. It wasn't sensationalism. It was arithmetic injustice. Lockridge's defense crumbled fast. Emails, testimonies, digital records, everything pointed to the same truth. A pattern of bias spanning decades. During recess, Xavier stood with Aaliyah in the courthouse hallway. How you holding up? He asked. She shrugged. It's strange. Everyone keeps thanking me, but all I did was exist. He smiled gently. Existing loudly is how revolutions start. She chuckled under her breath. I didn't mean to start one. You didn't, he said. The system did. You just made it visible. Within 2 months, the dominoes fell. The superintendent resigned for personal reasons. 3 teachers were dismissed. The district board was restructured. And the state education department announced new oversight measures for all public gifted programs. But it didn't stop there. Other schools started coming forward. Charlotte, Richmond, Minneapolis, Los Angeles. Parents of black students began demanding audits of academic placements. Teachers filed amicus briefs. The movement became a national conversation, one that couldn't be contained to one courtroom or one school. Cable networks called it the Wren effect. Aaliyah hated the name, but she understood the necessity. Change needed a face, and she had become it. When Xavier's team won the preliminary injunction, granting settlement payments and mandated reform, the courtroom erupted. Aaliyah stood at the center of it, applause echoing, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. What's next for you? How does it feel to make history? What do you want to say to your old school? She paused, her voice quiet but clear. I just want every kid who's ever been told they don't belong to know they do. The crowd roared. But Xavier noticed her hands trembling. That night he found her sitting on the courthouse steps long after the press had left. You okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. Yeah. Just thinking. About what? How easily they almost erased me. He sat beside her. They tried, and they failed. She looked at him, tired but proud. They'll try again. Not to me. To someone else. He nodded. That's why we keep fighting. 3 weeks later, the U.S. Department of Education issued an official statement citing systemic racial inequity in gifted placement as a federal priority. Congress announced hearings to address nationwide reform. And that's when the invitation came. A cream-colored envelope, stamped with the seal of the United States Congress. To Miss Aaliyah Wren, you are hereby invited to testify before the House Committee on Education and Civil Rights. She read it twice, breath catching in her throat. I have to go, she whispered. Her mother looked worried. It's a big stage, baby. Bigger than any classroom. Aaliyah smiled faintly. Good. That's where the lesson belongs. She packed her speech carefully, pages numbered and annotated. Each word measured, each sentence a pulse of truth. But as she boarded the car to the airport the next morning, her phone buzzed with a new message.
No sender ID. Just a text.
Stay silent at Congress. You've done enough. Her blood ran cold. A second message followed. If you speak, you won't make it to D.C. The screen dimmed in her hand. Her reflection ghosted in the glass. She's invited to testify in front of Congress, but receives a threat on the way there. The hearing room was colder than expected, lined with wood-paneled walls, the U.S. seal gleaming overhead. Cameras panned. C-SPAN streamed. Senators shuffled papers. A wall of media buzzed behind the rows of spectators. Aaliyah Wren walked in without an entourage. No lawyer, no PR rep, just her mother, sitting quietly in the gallery. She wore a simple navy blue blazer and carried a single folder of notes, handwritten, neatly stacked, pages worn from handling. The chairwoman tapped her gavel. The Education and Civil Rights Committee will now hear testimony from Ms. Aaliyah Wren. She didn't rush. She didn't bow her head. She stepped to the microphone with the calm of someone who had spent her entire life being underestimated, and was finally allowed to speak. Thank you, Madam Chair, she began. My name is Aaliyah Wren. I'm a student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And before that I was a girl in the back of the classroom. A pause. The room stilled. Most people didn't see me. The ones who did thought I wasn't trying, thought I was too quiet, thought my silence meant I had nothing to say. But I wasn't silent. I was thinking. Senators leaned forward. I was solving equations on napkins because I wasn't given paper. I taught myself recursive systems from online forums because my school wouldn't place me in advanced math. I stayed after school to clean up the very rooms I wasn't invited to study in. She looked up, eyes unwavering. And when I submitted something brilliant, they said I cheated. Gasps. Flashes. Pens paused mid-note. But this isn't just about me, she continued. It's about thousands of students you've never heard of, because their genius was ignored before it could be recorded. She flipped to the next page. One of them is Marcus, who was told he should aim for something realistic when he said he wanted to be a doctor. Another is Priya, who was pulled from advanced science because her accent confused the teacher. Another is Keisha, who had the highest test scores in her grade, but was placed in remedial math for behavior monitoring. Each name landed like a verdict. These aren't anecdotes. They're patterns. And those patterns point to a truth that should shame this entire system. Brilliance is not scarce. Access is. A murmur rippled across the hearing room. She continued, her voice steady, even as her hands trembled behind the podium. I wasn't the exception. I was just one of the few who got seen. Because someone leaked a video. Because people online saw what my school tried to bury. A hush fell again. And because of that, I now stand here. But I shouldn't have had to survive a viral moment to be believed. Her final page shook slightly as she read. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for policy, not apologies. Action. She looked the chairwoman in the eye. Fund gifted programs that find potential, not just polish. Audit classrooms, interrogate biases, create teacher pipelines from the communities they teach. And above all, stop measuring students by the silence you force them into. No one moved. Then applause, soft at first. Then swelling not just from the audience but from a few members of Congress themselves. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Clearly moved. Ms. Wren, she said, on behalf of this committee, and I believe this country, thank you. By evening her testimony was the top clip on every platform. Headlines everywhere. The girl with the napkin just rewired Washington. Aaliyah Wren demands change, and gets it. Within 72 hours, the House passed a preliminary funding resolution for inclusive gifted education. Millions were allocated toward nationwide audits and teacher bias training. And in a unanimous vote, the Department of Education announced the formation of a new federal body, the Aaliyah Wren Initiative for Equity and Excellence. Its mission ensure every classroom in America sees what it used to ignore. Back at MIT, her study group welcomed her home with a quiet celebration. Candles, chalkboards covered in inside jokes, and pastries with Madame Wren frosted in shaky icing. But Aaliyah remained thoughtful, because one question still burned in her chest. Who had leaked the interrogation video? Ruiz had recorded it, that was clear. He had spoken up, but he hadn't said if he'd been the one who uploaded it. And MIT had never confirmed the source. One night, as she walked back from the campus library, her phone buzzed. Blocked number. One message. Heard you testified. About time they listened. Then a second. Figured you deserved to know who hit upload that night. Her breath caught. Another message came in. A Dropbox link. She clicked. It opened a folder titled Rem Leak. Metadata. She scrolled. Uploader. Halton 18. Upload location. Lockridge High, East Janitor Network. She blinked.
Grace.
Miss Grace Halton. The janitor. The one who first saw her sketch in the trash. The one no one had listened to. The one who had once told Aaliyah, some trash is treasure. She'd seen the sketch. She'd seen the interrogation. And when no one else acted, she did. The quietest person in the building had made the loudest move. Aaliyah stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed one message back. Thank you. No reply. Just silence. But this time, silence didn't mean absence. It meant revolution. Planted in secret, now blooming in full. One final mystery is revealed. Who really leaked her video that saved her? It wasn't a press release that revealed the truth. It wasn't a trending topic, or a leak, or even a confession. It was a quiet moment. A single archived interview from a university bulletin nearly 20 years old. Rediscovered by a curious journalist chasing leads in Aaliyah's story. There, in a grainy photo, stood a younger Grace Halton. Not in a janitor's uniform, but in a lab coat, smiling, hopeful, standing beside a whiteboard filled with complex equations. Grace Halton, PhD candidate, MIT Mathematics Department. The article was dated. The caption below it read, Halton's work on symmetry patterns in quantum time systems is reshaping the department's approach to theoretical modeling. But no thesis from her existed in the MIT archives. No defense, no dissertation, no graduation record. Just silence. And then, disappearance. Aaliyah sat with the article in her hands. The sunlight pouring across her dorm room desk. The image curling slightly at the corners. She remembered the soft strength in Miss Halton's voice. The quiet way she handled every spill at Lockridge. The way she always lingered near the math lab. Not out of obligation, but something deeper. Familiarity. And then it made sense. Grace had seen brilliance in the trash because she once lived it, and they had thrown her out too. A week later, Aaliyah flew to Boston, under the radar. No press, no escort, no headlines. She walked down a narrow street, in Dorchester, paper in her coat pocket, nerves coiled like wire. The building was plain. A converted duplex. Miss Halton answered the door herself. Older now, in plain clothes. The same quiet eyes. I knew you'd come eventually, Grace said, voice warm, but not surprised. You were at MIT, Aaliyah said. Grace nodded. A long time ago. You should have stayed. I tried. Grace stepped aside, inviting her in. Tea. Silence. Then the truth. They said I was aggressive, she said softly. Too many questions, too many papers without male co-authors. I filed a complaint. A few months later, my advisor changed my funding status, then revoked my project access. I couldn't finish. She stirred her cup. The systems weren't broken. They were designed that way. Aaliyah listened without interrupting. You've already done more than I ever did, Grace said, and you did it with the weight I couldn't carry. I carried yours too, Aaliyah said quietly. Grace's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Why didn't you tell me it was you who leaked the video? Aaliyah asked. Grace smiled. Because I knew the world wouldn't listen if it thought the janitor had an agenda. But it might listen. To you. 3 months later, Aaliyah stood on stage at the opening of the Wren Halton Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to identifying and mentoring overlooked Black math students across the country. The launch event was modest, held in a small museum auditorium near MIT. But the guest list was historic. Educators, activists, students from Title I schools, professors from HBCUs, and alumni from across generations. Aaliyah took the podium. She wore a charcoal suit. No notes. Before they saw me, she began. She saw me. She turned to Grace, seated in the front row, finally wearing a name badge that said what the world had once stolen from her. Grace Halton, PhD, honorary, awarded by MIT. She picked my napkin out of a trash can, not because it was clean, not because she knew it would go viral, but because she recognized the patterns, because she had drawn them once too. The crowd stood in ovation. And behind the scenes, where cameras couldn't reach, Aaliyah handed Grace a sealed envelope.
What's this?
Grace asked. A job offer, Aaliyah said. You built my belief. Now let's build something together. Grace opened it. Inside, Senior Research Assistant, Wren Halton Foundation. Full salary, full benefits. No one else above her but Aaliyah. Grace wiped her glasses, her hands shaking slightly. I don't know what to say. You already said it, Aaliyah whispered. When no one else would. The Foundation's first initiative launched in under 90 days. A national math camp fully funded for low-income Black students, pairing them with mentors, scholars, and researchers of color. Their slogan was simple. Not hidden, overlooked. Aaliyah and Grace co-designed the curriculum. MIT donated lab space. Dozens of universities followed suit. Within a year, test scores surged. Scholarships increased. And perhaps most importantly, stories changed. Students who had once been silenced were now speaking, teaching, leading. One girl from Oakland published a paper on fractal symmetry at age 15. A boy from Baton Rouge taught combinatorics to college freshmen before he even finished high school. When asked what made them believe they could do it, many said the same thing. I saw Aaliyah Wren at the White House. Aaliyah was awarded the Presidential Medal of Educational Innovation. She stood beside the Secretary of Education, as policy after policy referenced her name. Audits, training reforms, funding shifts. But she stayed grounded. She kept teaching, kept writing, kept building the bridge so others wouldn't fall where she had almost disappeared. When a university offered her a tenure track at age 21, she declined. I'm not done fixing the system that failed me, she said. Her office wasn't large, a corner unit in Cambridge. White walls, long windows, soft light, books stacked floor to ceiling. A single desk, old and wooden, polished but scarred. And on the wall above it, in a frame made of reclaimed Lockridge hide bleachers, hung the napkin. Aged now, edges curled, lines faded, but legible.
Brilliant.
Revolutionary. Above it, etched in gold lettering, a plaque read, They almost missed me. She looked at it every morning. Not with bitterness, but with power. Because now, she made sure no one else would be missed again.